The goal of this self-study module is to teach you about proper citation format for the court decisions you will both read about and cite in the research memos that you prepare. This presentation will discuss why citation format is important, the proper citation format for each court's decisions, and will also note additional considerations of which you should be aware. When citing a case in a research memo, it is important to provide the proper citation for that case. This will allow anyone reading your memo, whether that be a colleague, an IRS auditor, or a judge, to find the case and to verify your interpretation of and reliance on that decision. Some people might say citation format is trivial. I would argue that this assertion is incorrect and that small details like citation format matter significantly. Consider, for example, the performance of both the U.S. men's and women's teams in the 4x100 relay in the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Neither of those teams medaled in those relays. Why? Because they didn't have the fastest runners in the world? To the contrary, both the U.S. men's and women's teams included many of the fastest runners in the world. Look at the photo carefully. The problem for both teams was that the baton was dropped on the exchange to the anchor. That's a small detail with significant consequences. In the grand scheme of all of the work that goes into writing a research memo, proper citations and citation format may seem like a minor detail. Often, your reader will trust that you have accurately interpreted the cases you cite and will base their conclusions on your research memo. However, should your reader not be able to find a case you cite because of an error in citation format, it is likely that they will begin to doubt the accuracy of your research process and the veracity of your research conclusion. Paying close attention to citation format suggests that you have undertaken a careful and detailed analysis and have made sure to accurately present your research results. Let's begin our discussion of case citations. First, let's talk generally about the content of a case citation. All case citations should contain the following information. First, the name of both parties to the case. Second, the name of the reporter, the book in which the case is published, and the corresponding volume and page number. Third, the court in which the case was decided, either noted by you or implicit from the citation. And finally, the year of the decision. Note that preferences for citation format may differ depending on for whom you are writing. However, a citation containing all of these elements should allow someone to find the case that you are citing, even if they might have presented the citation differently. Some additional general information about citation format appears on the next slide. First, the names in the case citation should appear in italics. When I say names, which names am I referring to? The parties to the case. As you likely know, in court cases, the two parties to the decision are the plaintiff and the defendant. In tax cases specifically, these two parties are the taxpayer and the IRS. How the name of the IRS is referenced in citations has varied across time. It used to be the case that the last name of the IRS commissioner was used to represent the government. This is why in many early cases you will see the name Helvering as one of the parties to the case. Guy Helvering was one of the first IRS commissioners. At some point, it was decided that this naming convention created more confusion than necessary. Some courts began to reference the IRS generically as commissioner, while other courts referenced the IRS as the United States. However the reference to the IRS appears in the Research Service publication of the case should be carried over to the citation you provide in your memo. Second, set off different portions of the citation with a comma. You will note as we go through this discussion that different portions of the citation are divided by a comma. Try to be consistent in your referencing in terms of where you place those commas. Third, the citation provided should reflect where you read the case. This is important. Technically, the official citation format for a case includes a specific reporter. That official or legal writing format requires the citation either reflect the official federal government reporter, where there is such a reporter, or use the West reporter's name where there is not an official federal government reporter. We do not have access to the Westlaw research databases. Thus, I will ask you to provide a citation that reflects where you actually read the case. In other words, your citation will contain a reference to either a CCH or an RIA reporter. Fourth and finally, in abbreviating United States, where that name appears in a citation, you can omit America. Additionally, you can also leave off the first names and middle initials of any of the individuals that appear in the citation. However, this is not the case for an entity. The full name of the entity should appear in the citation. All of these details may not be perfectly clear to you now. That's okay. Our discussion of each court citation format will come back to these elements in detail. Keep them in mind as we discuss these citations. Let's start our discussion with trial court case citations. As you recall, there are 3 different trial courts in which a taxpayer can have a dispute heard: the U.S. Tax Court, a U.S. District Court, or the U.S. Court of Federal Claims. Citations for cases from each of these courts will contain the elements discussed on the previous 2 slides. There will be elements of the citations that are similar from court to court and elements that will differ. Trying to understand the composition of the citation, rather than simply trying to memorize the proper citation format for each court, will likely lead to a better outcome for you and result in knowledge that stays with you. Let's begin with district court cases. A reporter is a book that contains the decisions of one or more courts. Despite the fact that cases are now primarily read online, citation format still revolves around the book or the reporter in which the case is, in theory, published. Tax cases heard in the district courts are published in a handful of different reporters. Again, in proper legal writing, the West reporter would appear in the citation for a district court case. However, the university does not have access to the Westlaw research database. Thus, your citation will include a reference to either the CCH or the RIA reporter. In other words, it will reflect the research service in which you read the case. I have included information about the West reporter in this presentation for the sake of completeness. You will likely come across this citation format when you are reading cases, your textbook, or tax articles, and as a result, you should be familiar with the names of the West reporters. The CCH reporter that contains district court decisions is named the United States Tax Cases Reporter, abbreviated in the citation as USTC. The information, in addition to the reporter name that will appear in the citation, includes the volume of the reporter and the page number on which the case begins, as indicated on the slide. The volume number, in this case 73-1, precedes USTC, and the page number that begins with the paragraph or Pilcrow symbol comes after USTC. The RIA reporter for district court decisions is named the American Federal Tax Reports Reporter. The 2D indicates that we are in the second set of the AFTR reporter. Once the AFTR reporter reached 99 volumes, the 2D was added and the reporter volume numbering started over. The approach to the volume and page number conventions differs across CCH and RIA, but here again, the volume number comes before AFTR 2D and the page number comes after the reporter name abbreviation. As you practice with the citations on the next few slides, keep in mind that often the only information that will differ across citations in CCH and RIA is the name of the reporter. Irrespective of the research database in which you read a case, the names of the parties will be the same, as will the court in which the case was heard and the year that the case was decided. There is a handout posted to Canvas in the Module section for Class 13 that is entitled Case Citation Handout. Please open that handout now and leave it open for the remainder of this presentation. The first and second page of that handout provide information about a case heard in district court in which Lori Barber was the plaintiff. I have provided you with information you would see for this case if you opened it up in Lexis, CCH, or RIA. The Lexis information appears at the top of the page. While I will not expect you to know Lexis citations, I have provided you this information so that you could see what appears in the database when you open a district court case in Lexis. Look next at the information provided in the RIA database for the Barber case. Take a minute, pause the presentation if you need to, and see if using the information from the previous slides, you can compose the citation for this case. How did you do? Let's talk about the information in the citation. The first part of the citation contains the names of both of the parties to the case in italics. In general, in trial court case citations, the name of the taxpayer appears first. Note that for an individual taxpayer, the first name can be left out of the citation, though it is not wrong to include it if you would prefer to do so. The second part of the citation includes the reporter information. The 85 reflects the volume of the AFTR 2D reporter, and the 2000-879 that comes after the reporter name reflects the page number on which the case appears in the reporter. The third and last part of the citation includes, in parentheses, the court in which the case was heard and the year that the case was decided. With respect to this part of the citation, note that the name of the court only needs to be included in the parentheses if it is not evident from the reporter. Here, the reporter name, AFTR2D, is not informative about the court in which the case was heard, so the court's name must be included in the parentheses. Also note that since there are numerous district courts in the United States, it's usually not enough to include only the abbreviation for the state. Any modifiers to the state's name should appear in the citation. Thus, from the citation, we know that this case was heard in the Northern District Court of California. Finally, as far as the year that appears in the citation, if you look at the RIA provided information, you will note that this is not the tax year at issue in the case. Rather, the year referenced in the citation is the year that the case was decided. The case citation handout also contains information about the Barber case that appears in CCH. Once again, pause the presentation and see if you can provide the CCH citation for the Barber case. Compare your answer to the answer here. How did you do? If you look carefully at the CCH and RIA versions of the citation, you'll note that the only difference relates to the reporter, volume, and page number. That is, the name of the taxpayer and the other party to the case, as well as the court and the year the case was decided, are the same. This shouldn't be surprising. This is, after all, the same Barber case. The difference in the citations reflect where the case was published, not substantive differences in the case. Now let's talk about citation format for cases from another trial court, the Court of Claims. If you look carefully at this list of reporters, you will note that the only one that differs from the district court decisions is the Westlaw reporter. CCH and RIA publish Court of Claims decisions in the same reporter as they publish district court decisions. As a result, the citation format for district court and Court of Claims decisions is fairly similar. Look again at the case citation handout. Find the information for the Bennett Court of Claims case. Pause the presentation and take a few minutes to provide both the RIA and the CCH citations for this case. Compare your answer to what's here. How did you do? Hopefully, you were able to apply what you learned for district court cases to this Court of Claims citation. While the case concerns a different taxpayer, both of the names of the parties to the case, with the taxpayer first, appear in italics at the start of the citation. The reporter, volume, and page number information appear next. The primary difference between a Court of Claims and a district court case citation is the name of the court that appears in the parentheses. Also note that because the Court of Federal Claims is a court of national jurisdiction, the reference to the name of the court does not need to be modified with any sort of geographic location. FedCL is a sufficient abbreviation for the Court of Claims in such a case citation. Now we'll talk about citations for tax court cases. In general, the Tax Research Services publish tax court decisions in reporters that differ from the other trial court decision reporters. Think about why this is. With respect to the AFTR and the USTC reporters, RIA and CCH are, in effect, saying, hey, there are a lot of tax cases heard in a number of different courts. We will pull those tax cases and publish them in a single reporter. On the other hand, the tax court hears only tax cases and a significant number of tax cases. As a result, each research service publishes a separate reporter for tax court cases. To state what I just said in another way, there are two primary differences between tax court case citations and other trial court case citations. First, the reporter names will differ. Remember that the tax court issues three types of decisions: regular, memorandum, and small claims division decisions. Each of these decisions has its own reporter in both CCH and RIA. The second difference is that tax court case citations need only include the name of the taxpayer in the citation. Why? The second party in a tax court case will always be the IRS. Therefore, the reference to the IRS can be left out of the citation. It is understood that in a tax court case, the IRS is the second party to the case. Let's look more carefully at the information on this slide. Tax court regular decisions are published by the GPO, the Government Printing Office. This means that regular tax court decisions are printed in an official federal government reporter and have an official citation. Also note that there are two versions of this citation, the temporary and the permanent version. Both citations reference the same case. In other words, there is no difference in the source that is being referenced. The reason for these two citation formats is that the case gets a temporary citation until it is officially printed in the tax court reporter. Once it's printed in that reporter, we stop using the temporary citation and instead use the permanent citation. What is the difference between these two citations? The temporary citation leaves a blank line for the eventual page number of the reporter on which the case will appear and includes the number of the case. That is, the number of the case heard by the tax court this year. The permanent citation replaces the number of the case with the page number in the reporter on which the case appears. Okay, now that we understand the official citations, let's talk about how we will provide citations for tax court cases, given we will not be reading these cases in their official reporter. Here's information from RIA for the First Chicago Corporation tax court case. Given what you have learned about other trial court citation formats, and taking into consideration what we talked about on the previous slide, take a minute and see if you can provide the citation for the case. How did you do? Hopefully, you were able to apply what you learned and provide the correct tax court citation. Note that once again, the name of the taxpayer appears as the first part of the citation, but any mention of the IRS or the federal government is left out of the citation. It's understood that the second party to the case is the IRS. As far as the reporter, RIA, like the federal government, also calls its tax court reporter TC. Thus, the only modification needed is to add RIA in front of the TC. As with other trial court case citations, the volume of the reporter and the page number on which the case appears are also included in the citation. The last part of the citation, contained in the parentheses, includes only the year the case was decided. Why was the court left out? The fact that this case was heard in tax court is clear from the name of the reporter. As a result, it's not necessary to include the name of the court again in the parentheses. Now let's look at the same tax court regular decision in CCH. CCH provides a number of different references at the top of the case. Let's start by understanding what those are. If you look at the information in the first box, you will see a number for the case. For the first Chicago case, this number is 47218. This is a CCH numbering convention that can be used to provide a citation. The number in the second box reflects the permanent citation by including the page of the reporter on which the case is printed. The number in the third box, which continues on the next line, reflects the temporary citation, the number of the case heard in that year. Pause the presentation and try and provide the citation for this tax court decision as if you read the case in CCH. How did you do? The taxpayer's name has not changed, and the IRS is not referenced in the citation. Again, it's understood that the IRS is the second party to the case because the case is being heard in tax court. Like RIA, CCH uses the name TC for its reporter for regular tax court decisions. Thus, as with the RIA case citation for this case, only CCH needs to be included to provide a proper citation, and only the year the case was decided appears in parentheses. The second citation uses the CCH numbering convention and is also an appropriate citation for a regular tax court decision that you read in CCH. It would be nice if tax court memorandum decisions were published in the same reporter as regular tax court decisions, but they are not. Why? Primarily because tax court memo decisions are not published by the government printing office, but only by private publishers. As such, each publishing service has its own name for the reporter in which the memorandum decision is published. CCH names its reporter the Tax Court Memorandum Decisions Reporter, abbreviated TCM. You'll note that the reporter is preceded by a volume number and followed by a page number, much like the AFTR and USTC reporter citations. RIA takes a slightly different approach. Its reporter is named TC Memorandum Decisions, abbreviated RIA TC Memo in citations. For this reporter, the volume and page number are combined into one number that appears following the reporter name. Thus, in RIA TC Memo citations, there will not be a number in front of the reporter name. I hope by now you are getting the hang of citation format. Take a minute and see if you can provide the citation for the CAR TC Memorandum Decision as if you read the case in CCH. How did you do? I hope you remembered that you could leave Commissioner out of the citation as this is a tax court decision. Also note that much like a regular tax court decision, the CCH number for the case can be used to provide a citation for the case. If you will use this CCH convention, don't forget to include the M in the parentheses in your citation. This distinguishes a memorandum decision from a regular decision. And finally, while it's not the situation here, if Jack and Louise had different last names, only the last name of the first plaintiff mentioned in the citation would need to appear in the citation. In other words, not all of the plaintiffs in the case, where there is more than one plaintiff, need to appear in the citation for your case. This slide presents the information for the CAR case that appears in RIA. Take a minute, pause the presentation, and provide the RIA citation for this same memorandum decision. How did you do? Once again, the citation follows the same format as all of the other citations we have discussed: name, reporter, and year. You might think that it's not necessary to provide the year the case was decided in parentheses, since it seems obvious that the case was decided in 1985 from the reporter volume page number. However, it could be that a decision published in a 1985 reporter was actually decided early in 1986. Thus, it's best to be complete and include the year in parentheses. The citation format for tax court small case decisions will be similar to the citation format for TC memo decisions. The primary difference will be that the name of the reporter will differ. As such, we won't spend time on that citation format. Hopefully, you are able to figure it out. Instead, let's move on to discussing appellate court case citations. As you know, if either the taxpayer or the IRS is unhappy with the outcome of a case, they can choose to appeal their case to the appropriate circuit court. At the circuit court level, appellate courts are divided into the regional and federal circuit courts of appeal. The 94 U.S. judicial districts are organized into 12 regional circuits. Appeals from these district courts and the tax court are heard in the appropriate regional circuit court of appeal. The Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit has nationwide jurisdiction to hear appeals in specialized cases, including those heard in the Court of Federal Claims. This is why the Federal Circuit is relevant to the research you will undertake. Let's talk about the citation format for these appellate court cases. Here's the good news. Appellate court case citations are fairly similar to district court and court of claims case citations. Why? CCH and RIA publish all of these decisions in the same reporters. If you look carefully at this list of reporters, you will note that once again, the only new reporter name is the West Reporter. CCH publishes regional and federal circuit court decisions that are tax-related in the USTC reporter, and RIA publishes these decisions in the AFTR reporter. What will the main difference be between a citation for a trial court case and a citation for a circuit court case? The court that appears in the parentheses will need to reference the circuit court in which the case was heard, rather than the trial court. Thus, in the example on this slide, CA does not stand for California, but instead Court of Appeal. That's really the only substantive difference between circuit court and trial court case citations. Find the West Oak Appellate Court case information in the case citation handout. Take a few minutes and see if you can provide both the RIA and the CC8 citations for this case. Pause the presentation if you need. How did you do? Hopefully you were able to provide the citation with no trouble. Note that in this particular case, the IRS is referenced as commissioner because in the citation, the second party to the case is specified as Commissioner of Internal Revenue. Rather than including the term commissioner in the citation, some people might instead include the abbreviation CIR. Either of those references to the Commissioner of the IRS is appropriate. With respect to the information in parentheses, because the reporters for these decisions do not make it obvious in which court the case is heard, the name of the court appears in the parentheses. This case was heard in the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. Note once again that this is the primary difference between citations for non-tax court, trial court decisions, and circuit court decisions. The last court whose citation format we need to be familiar with is the Supreme Court. As you know, no one has the right to have their case heard in the Supreme Court. The court hears a limited number of cases each year. While rarely in the majority of cases heard, tax cases are sometimes heard by the Supreme Court. Looking more carefully at the information on this slide, first note that there is an official federal government reporter for Supreme Court decisions. Again, there is an official reporter because the GPO publishes these cases. The official reporter is named United States Reports and is abbreviated US in the official citation. Rather than including the official reporter in the citations you provide, your citation will include the reporter of the research service in which you read the case. Once again, RIA publishes tax-related Supreme Court decisions in the AFTR reporter, and CCH publishes these decisions in the USTC reporter. How do you think a case citation is modified to reflect that the decision is a Supreme Court decision? Hopefully, you have an idea of what that modification is without my telling you what it is. Let's get some practice with Supreme Court citations on the next slide. Find the Donruss Supreme Court case information in the case citation handout. Take a few minutes and see if you can provide both the RIA and the CC8 citations for this case. I hope that you are able to provide the correct citation. As is true of the other citations we discussed, this citation begins with the names of the parties to the case in italics, is followed by the reporter name, which includes a volume number before the reporter name and a page number after the reporter name, and the citation concludes with the court and the year the case was decided in parentheses. In answer to the question on the previous slide, the difference between a Supreme Court and a Circuit Court case citation would be the name of the court that appears in the parentheses. The Supreme Court is commonly abbreviated USSC in citations. You might notice that in this citation, the name of the U.S. appears before the name of the taxpayer. This is not a mistake. In general, the party bringing the case appears first in a citation. Thus, at the trial court level, the taxpayer's name usually appears first because it is generally the taxpayer's decision to sue the IRS. At the appellate court level, convention would dictate that the name of the party bringing the appeal appear first in the citation. However, in tax cases, we do not generally follow this convention. Because the federal government is most always a second party in such a case, putting the name of the government first wouldn't be very helpful in finding the case. That is, there would be too many cases to easily distinguish between them, nor would it be very useful in referencing a case in a research memo. Thus, even though at the circuit court level, technically the party bringing the appeal should be the party whose name appears first in the citation, generally, in tax cases, the taxpayer's name appears first, irrespective of who is bringing the appeal. However, at the Supreme Court level, we follow the standard legal convention that says that the party bringing the appeal appears first in the citation. In this case, the IRS is appealing an unfavorable decision at the circuit court level, which is why the U.S. is the first name in the citation. Before we talk about some additional considerations regarding citation format, let's take a few minutes and review what we have learned with two examples. Pause the presentation and look carefully at these two citations. What, if anything, is wrong with either of them? With respect to the Smith citation, there seem to be two problems. First, either the reporter name or the court in the parentheses is incorrect. Tax court decisions are not published in the AFTR reporter. Let's presume that the court was incorrect. For example, the case could have been a circuit court case that was appealed from the tax court, and the person providing the citation was not careful with the names of the court. Note also that if this was a circuit court case, there would need to be two parties in the names portion of the case citation. Only in tax court cases can the government, the second party, be left out of the citation. What's the second problem? As you read more cases in RIA, you will note that there generally seems to be a correlation between the first part of the page number reference and the year in which the case was decided. That is, given the page number begins with 2004, we would expect that the case was decided in 2004 or perhaps even 2005, but 1996 definitely seems too early. 1996 might have been the tax year at issue in the case, but that would not be the year that should be included in the citation. What about the Jones case citation? The name of the court is incorrect, but not in the same way as in the previous citation. Circuit court cases are published in the USTC reporter. However, regional circuit courts are numbered 1 through 11, and the 12th regional circuit is the DC circuit. Thus, if the circuit court's jurisdiction included New York, the court name should have been CA2 rather than CANY. This presentation has discussed citation format in the context of how you should present case citations in the tax research memos you will write for this class. While I am positive that if you provide the citation as prescribed in this presentation, the person reading your work will be able to find the case that you are referencing, I am also certain that people's preferences for citation format vary. So first, remember that in legal research generally, the official reporter's name should appear in the case citation. However, because we will not read the cases in the official reporter or in the Westlaw Research Database, your case citation should include the name of the reporter of the research service in which you read the case. Second, the citation presented on the bottom half of the slide is what is known in legal writing as a string citation. The person providing the citation included references to a number of different reporters in the same citation. While you will see this citation approach in some of the cases that you read, you should not provide string citations in your work in this class. In other words, the name of only one reporter should appear in the citations you provide in your research memos. To sum up what we have learned, first, as discussed on the previous slide, your citation should include the reporter name provided by the research service in which you read the case. Second, as you went through the presentation, hopefully you noticed that there were more similarities than differences in the citations for cases from the different courts. The primary differences include the reporter name, whether the name of the IRS needs to appear in the citation, and whether the name of the court needs to appear in the parenthetical information in the citation. Third, with respect to how the names of the parties to the case appear in the citation, this presentation discussed general rules of thumb for citation format. Where the names of the parties to the case appear in a different order in the case in the research service, do not change the order of those names in the citation you provide in your research memo. Additionally, if the case references the IRS as the United States, include United States in your citation. Don't change the United States to the IRS. Fourth, providing the correct citation is an important ingredient of a good research memo. This concludes our discussion of citation format. Don't hesitate to ask me any questions about anything you are unclear about. You might also take a few minutes and look at a handful of case citations in both the RIA and CCH research services. One way to pull up a lot of citations quickly is to search for the name Smith in the tax cases portion of the database. You should examine the citations for a variety of courts and time periods and make sure that you could comfortably provide the citation for the case. Finally, pay attention to the citations as you begin to read cases. This will help you to become better at providing the proper citation format.